Hello, everybody. Welcome to this latest session in Campaign Connect. My name's Steve Barret. I'm the Editorial Director of Campaign US, and I'm really delighted to be here with Kristi VandenBosch, who is the US President of Oliver, and we're going to talk about InHousing. Welcome, Kristi. How are you doing?
Thank you, Steve. Very well.
So InHousing, the title of the session is Be Afraid of Standing Still, How InHousing Changed Marketing Forever. Let's start with what are the big misconceptions about InHousing? Because we hear that term a lot, thrown around a lot these days, but I don't think everybody truly understands what it is. It's often associated with cost cutting or programmatic advertising. Just give us an insight into what your vision of InHousing is and how it can be of a benefit to your clients.
There are a lot of misconceptions, and most of them actually come from a place of honestly just not understanding why the shift is happening. Oliver is different and successful because we don't just build capability, we build ability, an ability inside a client's business. So we effectively enable our clients to outsource in-housing. They get all the benefits, and they are not, to your point, just sort of cost benefits, but with a proven sort of talent and operating model. It's not just built for them, it kind of belongs to them. And I use that term metaphorically, but because obviously we still operate it on their behalf, but we integrate into their business and into their culture, and we almost become a hybrid of collaborator and colleague with them. Another thing is that we don't actually have a predisposition as to what it looks like. We don't have a predisposition of what it looks like when we go into build, and we don't care what it looks like next year, and we don't care what it looks like in 5 years. We actually have a client who has changed strategy in 3 times in 3 years. And we literally just adjust the team, and your typical external agency is never necessarily going to want to change its business model based on the fact that a client has. So our primary remit is this: does it make the client's business better and more effective? Are we collectively proud of its contribution on every dimension? And that's the business that we're in. And then I guess the final aspect of it, if I could, is culture. And agency culture was always sort of held up until tech startups took the crown as this powerful and fulfilling and creative meritocracy. And clients were frankly like a little bit intimidated by us. And I think this is a little bit of where it all started to kind of go wrong. We sustained that attitude as historical advertising services started to become less valuable and in some cases less trustworthy. And so we forgot the meaning of the word agency. And to be an agent is to act as a surrogate for another and literally to represent them. And so to be a progressive agency in sort of the time of modern marketing is really to reclaim that idea of representing the client, because that is agency. That is a culture of service in service of a greater good.
Yeah, and I think your contention is that the traditional agency model is failing in its objectives: growth, profit, awards, publicity, and recognition, rather than serving the client and giving the client the best solution possible. But also you're in an interesting position at Oliver in that you work, obviously you're working for the client, but you're also working with the agencies as well, because that's an important part of the process. So just tell us about how that dynamic works and what are the secrets to success? Because I imagine that's a very tricky dynamic.
You know, it is, I often refer to it as God's own work. We find ourselves often, because we sit in a very neutral place, kind of as, again, the voice and representative of the client in situations where there are multiple agencies coexisting. And I think it's really important to have that neutrality, but also that perspective on what all the agencies are bringing to the party. And I think that we're seen often as an existential threat to some agencies. We're seen as a sort of second cousin who really doesn't have the right to sit at the table. And as we start to build those relationships with them and actually, again, harness everyone's power to really serve the client well, we've really kind of, I think, changed the way a lot of these relationships and the way these businesses are working. I think traditional agencies can almost use this moment to reevaluate what they truly want from the business. They have the opportunity to become sort of unapologetically the agencies they always wanted to be, without taking on the services that they aren't proud of or don't enjoy. And I think I've seen a lot of them, especially our partners on some of the very large global clients, really emerge stronger, even though sometimes smaller, if they really are willing to embrace this idea of disrupting their own sort of perceived success. Many clients, most of our clients, still place enormous value on their outside perspective. But again, if they're doing work that they don't love or value or believe is in keeping with why they're there, then they should by all means recognize that that's not the business that they should be in. And that is ultimately why we will coexist beautifully in sort of a future world.
Yeah, we've seen a lot of rationalization of some really major and historical agency brands, haven't we, over recent years? What would your 3 top tips be to a client then to make everybody play nicely in the room, if you like? Because you've got the creative agency, the media agency, maybe the digital agency, the PR firm, and then Oliver as this sort of umbrella in-house operation. What are the 3 top tips you'd give to a client?
In terms of making that relationship work, it's being incredibly clear about the swim lanes. Also in granting authority. And if you put someone in charge of an integrated agency team, but they do not have authority to actually make decisions on the client's behalf, it becomes a very sort of impotent role. But ultimately, there are sort of 3 things that I would talk to a client about as they're considering both building in-house and how to build in-house. And the first is that, you may not be good at running an agency yourself. Some brands are arguably very good at it, and there's a high probability that others are going to replicate exactly what they're trying to change. So building capability inside is not about hiring people from agencies and putting them inside your business. And it's also not about sort of organizational redesign exercise to create these digital centers of excellence, or hiring a staffing company to fill an organization that has been designed by some consulting company. It is literally understanding, designing, building, and operating a team that is in service of a collective ambition. So it's a mutual endeavor that we have with our clients, and both sides understand what's at stake, and everyone's focused on the same objective. I think that ultimately is the best service we wind up bringing to clients in those integrated models, is we share the same objective.
And a lot of those shared objectives rely on your concept of generosity, which is an interesting one. Explain that and how it works in a practical sense. So maybe illustrate with an example.
So, I give a lot of credit for this idea and sort of bringing it to fruition to our executive creative director, Bernardo Andrada. And Bernardo always uses the term that creativity is generous. He encourages teams to bring ideas forward all the time to solve briefs that haven't even been issued, because we see business opportunities from inside that aren't always necessarily brought onto the table for other agencies. So by way of example, I lead a lot of these integrated agency teams for clients. And in the concepting phase, where all the agencies are working both collectively, but also sort of in their particular area of expertise, I'll have a creative director come forward and say, I've got this incredible activation idea, something that would be big news, like super PR worthy, we'd all get famous for it. And my response is always, that's amazing. Let's bring it to the activation agency so they can evaluate it and own it, because it's their swim lane. And I've had, new people to the organization say, well, why would we even bring it forward if it can't be our idea? And that's my teachable moment, because it is never our idea. The idea always belongs to the client. So you can train for it in these moments, but you do literally hire for generosity, and you recognize it and you reward it and you reinforce it from the top of the organization. It cannot be like a bait and switch in your values.
Yeah, it's that whole not invented here sort of philosophy, isn't it, that is kind of ingrained in not just in advertising and creative services, but in any business. And it does take a lot of getting over, and especially in a global environment as well, where you've got that added layer. But are there any other examples of that working in action for the client? And what's the biggest challenge of bringing in that concept of generosity and making it work across the board?
It is an egoless pursuit. And it does require that your client's objectives become yours. And again, the notion that agencies are sometimes in business for other things than what the client's objectives are, it is their business. Like, again, those targets for growth, those the desire for fame and awards, and all the things that come from being in this very public business that we're in. You have to, in many ways, be willing to set that aside and say, the only objectives I have as a business are the ones that my clients have. And so that is again, a sort of egoless pursuit, a humbleness, if you will, that you literally have to bring to this role every day if you are going to sit inside with them. You cannot be their competitor. You cannot be your other agency partner's competitor. You literally have to be the thing that knits it together. And I think that is, ultimately that giving for the greater good is sort of what has made us successful. And I think it is what will continue to cause these internal organizations to gain sort of more traction and become a more important part of the client's strategy.
I love those concepts of an egoless pursuit and humbleness in the advertising and creative industries, because that's not necessarily what it's been associated with over the years. And you've seen both sides of that. So do you think this is changing, and that people are realizing that is the client is going to have to really come first, not just in words, but in actions?
I think it's hard. And again, I think this year has been a wake-up call for everyone in the way that clearly no one saw COVID coming. The ability for an agency to pivot as its client had to, I think, was a little bit of a make or break moment for a lot of these relationships. A lot of companies weren't prepared for it. And funnily, because Oliver typically does sit on site with its clients, we were always used to working in an environment that was not our own. So when we had to go work from home or work from wherever, we were pretty comfortable with that. So we barely missed a beat. And I think that willingness to do what needed to be done in this particular time was one of those moments, again, that it probably humbled a lot of agencies. The growth opportunities that occurred prior were, reversed so fast that, everyone kind of got a little bit of whiplash from it. If you were an agency that was able to sort of put aside all the things that you had expected for yourself in this year and focus on all the things that the client had to do this year to literally survive, you probably came out of it with a much stronger relationship.
Yeah, that's an interesting concept, isn't it? Sometimes those sort of disruptive and crisis events really do sharpen everybody's minds, and some things do persist afterwards. It's clearly been working for Oliver, because you've grown 380% in the past 3 years. So talk us through that, and talk us through your part of the holding company, you and Mr. Jones, which brings a different set of companies and a suite of offerings to the table. Tell us how you've grown like that, and what being part of you and Mr. Jones has helped, how it's helped you do that.
I'll actually speak to that first. Joining David Jones and you and Mr. Jones is like rocket fuel to any company. His vision that he has for sort of technology-enabled marketing is what the future looks like. And so we were a little bit of a unique acquisition in that we look more like an agency than any of the companies he's invested in. But he also saw that Oliver was a technology company. We have an operating system that sits underneath our business that not only enables us to work globally, but it allows us to plug into all of those other you and Mr. Jones companies. So when our clients want to invest in technology solutions that can accelerate their business, we can make it really easy for them. There's just incredible synergy in the business. And to your question about growth, it has been literally remarkable, and yet also could have been predictable. I think the 380% growth that resulted in us being named Adweek's fastest growing large agency of the year this year was spectacular. But this year, in the year of COVID, we're growing nearly 100%. This year has decimated. It's put agencies out of business, and we're still growing, and at that kind of a rate. So clearly clients are doubling down on in-housing. A lot of our growth is actually organic. So whether we're expanding from local to regional to a global relationship with a client, or having a former client go to a new organization and bring us with them, the relationships that we've built based on this sort of trust and performance really have been the fuel for our expansion.
Yeah, tell us a bit about the working with you and Mr. Jones, other agencies, and what that can add to the mix, because there's some interesting operations within that group, aren't there?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, they range from being really great capability add-ons. So Blood, by way of example, which is an incredible strategic consultancy, Collectively, which has an influencer marketing capability. And again, all of these have technology that sits underneath them. They're fundamentally technology companies. Mo Films, which allows us to do distributed production around the world. These are all fantastic. But then we go into companies like 55, which is a data analytics firm, or a Jivox, which does digital content optimization. We literally have all of these interesting technologies to make available to clients, whether they just want to put their toe in the water with DCO and see if that's like a thing they want to invest in. We make it really simple for them to sort of plug into these capabilities, and they still feel it through the front door of Oliver. So it doesn't change sort of how they have to do business or their infrastructure. We literally can just sort of bring all of our family members together underneath our single technology to make them accessible.
So are you doing any execution and activation, or is it much more at the strategic level?
We do everything and anything that needs to be done. So in some situations, we are literally the creative AOR for an agency. And we do everything from brand strategy to communication strategy to all of the work through production and eventually trafficking it to media. In some cases, we are very much a production company for clients. And so all the things that they need to do at scale globally, the sizing of assets, the creation of e-commerce assets, things that are really about the blocking and tackling of the business, but are so important. We literally will take on all of that. And we've built out an amazing sort of production capability in low-cost markets around the world, where we can put work in Mexico City or Johannesburg, South Africa, or Kuala Lumpur, and be able to do a ton of scale really efficiently for clients. In some cases, we'll go in-house and we're literally their social community management organization, and we are their newsroom. And so we literally build what the client's objectives ask for. And we hire specifically for every single engagement. So we build not only the right chemistry team, but also sort of the right capability team, and literally can go in and create whatever it is that will best serve the business.
So when you're in that room with all the other agencies, how do you sort of avoid the temptation to, I don't know, about give the work to an Oliver agency or a you and Mr. Jones agency, and how, I guess that's all about this concept of generosity, right? That you're going to choose the best offer for the job, but you presumably think your offerings are the best offer.
You do the right thing because you're representing the client. If the client has made an investment in an agency partner and it's an important one to them, then it's an important one to me. And it's that simple. Like, my lens is their lens. If I believed we had a better capability and I wanted to actually present that to them, I would have a conversation with them about it. But it's never about selling our thing because it's our thing. It literally is, it is having respect for everyone who sits at the table because they're there for a reason. And that reason was because the client chose them to be there.
And what's the difference between Oliver and an Accenture, for example, or a McKinsey or one of the consulting firms?
I think the practicality of it is a big thing. We've been doing this for 16 years. It's all we do. We design and we build and we operate these agency capabilities inside of clients. And so I think when you come at it from a consulting perspective, and I went into a client organization for a year where the sort of setup for what I inherited had been driven by a consultancy engagement. And the impracticality often of those recommendations is based on just like, again, they're not in the business of running agencies. And so they can look at organizational redesign and they can look at staffing models and they can write the job descriptions and they can talk about workflow and how it will change. But until you literally implement these things and run them on an ongoing basis, they're a little bit, academic. And so I think their engagements are often a client's sort of first toe in the water of thinking about how to do transformational change. And it feels like transformation should be something a big consultancy should own. But this is something that really is, you want someone who has both design and operational expertise in this, who literally does nothing but this. And I think that that's where we've been able to really put some distance between ourselves and the consultancies, and that we're going to be there. Like, we're going to build this with you, and then we stay with you. We don't go away. We run it for you. And it becomes our collective thing that we do together. And I just think that that's a very different mindset. And I think clients really do appreciate ultimately that we have a proven model, that we're going to be there with them. If it's wrong, like if we build something together and we don't like what it is, that we'll change it for them. And we're still going to be there to do that with them. And so I think we run into them in new business situations and pitch scenarios in some cases. But usually there's enough distance between our models that it really isn't so much a competitive as it is just an interesting coexistence.
And just to finish, Kristi, where you talked about the year of COVID, where's in-housing going, both in 2021 and as we move forward? How's this whole thing going to evolve?
I think two areas really. One of which is it's going to stop being seen, and this is already happening very actively. It's not a marketing necessarily or procurement play. It is going to be seen as a global business strategy at the highest levels of the organization. And it's probably a little bit obvious, but the larger an organization, it actually becomes harder to scale because you have to scale talent and processes and technology and quality and culture and consequences. The business case alone, when you're talking about in-housing, can run to tens of millions of dollars, if not more, in potential savings to a business, which is not a number you propose lightly. Like, this is a major shift in business strategy. I think in-housing is going to become fundamental to the operations of the business. And unlike discretionary situations like during COVID, where a lot of marketing budgets got cut, a lot of marketing people got cut. And they're always sort of the first to take the axe when there's a recessionary time. I think that this sort of in-housing capability is going to be as necessary as having an IT or a finance function. I think the second area is that the remit is going to continue to evolve. I mentioned, we're sort of in that delicate situation of handling these integrated agency teams, even though we may not be the largest or the lead creative agency in the mix. But we do, again, have this neutral place, and we represent the client in a way that external partners aren't always able to. And yet we're one of them. So it's a weird nuance, but that neutrality seems to work really well. So that I think are kind of the two major things that we'll see shifting within housing.
Well, we're looking forward to tracking that story at Campaign, and thanks for joining us, Kristi, to talk about in-housing. Fascinating chat, and continued success to you.
Thank you, Steve. It was a pleasure to talk to you too.